Let's get to it. Weekend editions here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Willie J this morning, and a lot to get to. It is snow-covered. It is not horribly slick, but more than a dusting last night in the capital city. So welcome to Big Ten football. As earlier in the week, you had Nebraska weather, which meant mid-60s and putting for birdie. Now, fast forward to this weekend to close out the potentially final home game of the 2020 season. Minnesota is in town. We'll see how that shakes out for Nebraska. Don't forget Real Red Reaction immediately after Nebraska-Minnesota right here on ESPN Lincoln. Stream us ESPNLincoln.com. Your chance to sound off. Hopefully, the Nebraska seniors get sent out the right way. Those that truly have a final home game. Again, the pause button is in full effect for 2020, so some of those seniors could be super seniors in 2021 for Nebraska football, but a lot to get to with Nebraska, some of the keys for victory today. And we spent a lot of time this week about Nebraska handling success on the gridiron, stacking a couple of wins, pushing towards that 500 record, what's on the horizon bowl-wise, all of that in play if Nebraska handles their business today. And you've got a depleted Minnesota team that's got a good run game, and Mo Ibrahim rolling in, Fleck and his crew, so it should be pretty tasty. And you know what? Frost and Fleck 1 versus 1. This is kind of the rubber match in their first 3 years together in the Big Ten. So we'll spend some time. We'll rewind here with the Pirate Mike Leach. Not only did he go karaoke for us with cowbells, but he talked about bra size and signage. All right, so pretty good stuff from the Pirate coming up in 20 minutes. We'll check in with Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. I think he has his snow shovel out. And, of course, cousin Dino Schmidt will send us into the 9 o'clock hour with his prediction, Nebraska-Minnesota. Can join us this morning if you're out and about, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. At Willie J is where you can tweet at Will Wilson. So we'll get to Nebraska, Minnesota in a moment. First, let us spend a brief moment or two on the I-80 rivalry. Good first half for Nebraska basketball, 44-40, and Nebraska able to survive some turnover issues in the first half. That was absolutely not the case in the second half. 25 total turnovers for Nebraska basketball. 32% of Nebraska's possessions last night against Creighton resulted in a turnover. From upset to the outhouse, Nebraska was hanging around, and then the first 4 minutes of the second half kind of told this story. Creighton jumped out on a 7-0 run. That run extended to a 23-2 run. And overall, the run was 30-8. And the biggest thing with this basketball team with Coach Hoiberg is you start making bad passes, some bad decisions, you force things, and a blind double team comes down and you get your pocket picked. Creighton gets out in transition. They're phenomenal with Zagorowski and Mahoney just lighting it up from outside. The inside game was good for Creighton, too, when they decided to do that. Didn't have to a lot of times, but Nebraska's turnovers and issues on offense, and you've seen it with past Nebraska basketball teams, it affects their defensive intensity and sometimes their defensive effort. So you have a collection of dudes who have an edge to them in this 2020-2021 Fred Hoiberg team. You have a lot of talent on this basketball squad, but what you don't have right now is a team that knows how to handle adversity very well. You saw it against Georgia Tech, and you saw it again against Creighton, and quite frankly, Creighton's a team that could be finding their way to the Final Four. If I could see Iowa and Creighton play this year, I would watch that repeatedly because it'd be bombs away from the outside. And, Iowa's a hell of a team this year as well. Yes, I said that. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. But they're really, really awesome.
Did they win last night?
Yeah, they were rolling Iowa State. But this Nebraska basketball team, it just driving home from the Mercado, Piedmontese, we were Roadshow Friday, me and Jay Moore. Awesome stuff at Piedmontese. Was listening to Pavelka, and I love Kenny and Jake. And, it's... You had some guys that were just, even in the first half, we're forcing it a bit. We're making some tough decisions. And I want to just spend a minute here on Nebraska's paint. We'll get to football, I promise. But you had Lat again, and you're asking him to play that 5 spot, and it just needs to be better for him on offense. And it wasn't. And I love Ivan's effort to rebuild his body. And Ivan's a dude that really tries hard and puts his best effort forth, and it just needs to be better. And I think he'd tell you that. I think the coaches would tell you that. And the last couple of games, there needs to be more finishes by the big man when he's got a bunny down low. He's shed weight so he can be more explosive around the rim. And he's big enough to be able to go up and let's rock the rim a little bit. I mean, he's got a little bit better vertical now because of shedding some of that weight. And I'll say this for Ivan, is inconsistent as he can be at times. I think the big picture thing with Ivan could be pretty good for Nebraska because remember the kid was only 17 from France when he came over. What type of progress, what type of jumps can he make long term? You get a kid that young that's physically gifted, right, with that body. You just got to continue to chop wood with him on some offensive skills, find a comfort zone, and just work on the coordination part. We've all seen this, man. I mean, growing up, there was a kid, and I'm not calling Ivan an 8th grader, but I'm saying there's always a kid or two in your class when you hit 7th, 8th, or 9th grade that had, gorilla legs. He started shaving when he was 13, right?
Yeah.
And maybe he could pull off the old pack of smokes, right? Wouldn't get carded, but the guy couldn't catch a ball to save his life because his coordination was all jacked. I'm not saying that Ivan's coordination's jacked, but there needs to be better hands. All right. Let's hear from Fred Hoiberg real quick before we get into Nebraska-Minnesota. And you know what? The practiced emphasis in the day prep for Creighton was not turning the basketball over. It'll be key today in football. It killed Nebraska yesterday in basketball.
Well, that's been the big focus the last 2 days of practice has been getting back to movement. We've done a phenomenal job early in the preseason in our practices of moving and making simple plays. We do 3 simple play drills every day when the defense converges. You come to a jump stop and you make a 2-hand pass. Things you do, in elementary school, just trying to get our guys to understand if we make simple plays, we've got enough players out there and weapons that can knock down shots or start a chain reaction and attack a long closeout. We had some good possessions of movement in the first half, but we still tried to get in those small spaces and small gaps. So 25 turnovers, again, 12 in the first half, to only be down 4 points. We obviously did some really good things besides that. So, again, when you turn the ball over and then you get them out in transition, they just crush us with that. Tonight, we have to have a much better urgency of sticking with it for the entire 40 minutes. If you don't, you're not going to beat a team of this caliber.
More from Hoiberg. It looked better, at least for a half. You know how miserable last season was at a lot of different points. It was miserable against Creighton last year. At least you had a half of, well, you know what, they're in it. More from the mayor.
I mean, we'll look at both, Chris. That's what you do. You try to build on the positives and then fix the things that you need to work on. And there's plenty of both. There's plenty of both tonight. To be in it like we were, last time we were here, the game was over before the first media timeout. Tonight we played, I thought, besides the turnovers, a pretty damn good half. to be down 2 possessions against this team, coming off a devastating loss where we knew they were going to come out with fire and focus. But again, what was it, about a 5 or 6 minute run where they go on a 23-2 run on us, and it's done. It's over. You got to find a way to withstand those runs. We talked about that coming into this game. First half, we were phenomenal. They get up 8, we cut that thing back down to 2. Second half, it just, goes from 10 to 20 to 25, and it's over. So, it's just a concerted effort of sticking together and continuing to do the things that made you successful for the first 25 minutes of the game. We didn't do a good enough job of that.
Couple more thoughts from Fred Hoiberg, Hail Varsity Radio weekend. Fred, excited to get back to practice. Nebraska, a bit of a break before they gear up on the horizon. Of course, Big Ten action, Michigan looms, road trip to Wisconsin, and Fred's in search of that new formula as they try and regroup.
Well, I'm excited to get back on the practice court. We had the one day to prepare for this one after, the tough loss against Georgia Tech the other night. Now we get back to the basics and try to find a formula to keep us going for 40 minutes. And I'm excited about getting back in the practice court. I think our guys are too. This is a group that has pride. That's one thing I've learned about them. They're going to come in with focus. We have to, by rule, take a 3-day break. The 3-day break that we have to take, that all teams have to take. But when we get back out there for those 6 or 7 practices before we face Wisconsin, it's going to be hard. It's going to be demanding. It's going to be physical, and we have to get back to the basics and do those better. If we do that, I'm confident this team can win some games once we start playing in the Big Ten.
Final thought from Fred here. The gap. Is it as wide as Lincoln to Omaha?
Well, yeah. Coach Mack has done a great job of building this program up, and it's a team that has, guys that have been together for the last 3 years, and it's got a lot of experience and a ton of talent and guys that can shoot it from all over the floor. It's a very difficult team to prepare for and play against, especially on a short prep. Give them credit. They've done a phenomenal job of building this program to where it is right now. I still feel great about our future. I feel good about a lot of the pieces that we have in our roster, and I feel great about the recruiting class that we just signed. So we're going to be fine. We're going to continue to work and get better. We have 9 new faces on this team. That's not an excuse. That's reality. But we're going to get better, and we're going to keep fighting and swinging and try to correct a lot of things that we need to work on. But, to answer your question, Kevin, I'm really excited about the future of our program.
You've seen glimpses. You saw a half. You've got some high-level talent. It just needs to come together, and we'll see if Nebraska can regroup as they lock in for Big Ten play. Chris Schmidt, Willie J, Weekend Edition, Hail Varsity Radio. So Nebraska drilled 98-74 by Creighton. Speaking of drilling, that happened in Minneapolis last year. The Big Red embarrassed, emasculated by Minnesota 34-7. Is it different this game for Nebraska football? And there's a lot on the line. You've seen progress the last couple of games. You'll never forget the Illinois incident, right? And Nebraska has fought to play this football season. Do they go out like they've been playing? And that's with extremely physical defense in the front, great team tackling with all levels. And do you get a run game, and do you get a clean, from a turnover standpoint, football game by your offense today? And Willie J, you look at the advantages here for Nebraska. Let's talk personnel. And Nebraska's good to go in the weekly fight against COVID. Nebraska's been good to go against the COVID monster that looms out there that's canceled too many football games in 2020. Minnesota down 20 players. So let's talk about motivation. Nebraska's motivated to get closer to 500. Nebraska's motivated to stack wins consecutively. I think there's some motivation by Minnesota, obviously. There's some guys that want to go out there and play, but Nebraska's a 10.5-point favorite. What's the gas tank like in reality on top of the rust versus rest thing? Wisconsin's the team I looked at this year with rust versus rest. They came off and blew away Michigan after missing the Nebraska game. Wisconsin came out against Indiana last weekend after, again, having to pause due to a canceled football game. And they were just all sorts out of sync and out of sorts. Nebraska's been able to stack games. They've missed one game, and that's Wisconsin, right? You look at Minnesota right now. They've got a run game. They've got a quarterback. But the key to Nebraska is how have they started, right? Nebraska football got out, blocked punt, bang. You're up 7 rip. It turns into 17-0 against Purdue. How'd you start against Iowa? Well, not great. You were down 10-0, but you stabilized, and you were able to get a score before half, a big sack before half against Iowa. Then you took the opening second half kickoff and went and doubled up the score, right? So you were able to jump out and do your thing, and you were up 7 points at one point in time in that ball game. Same with Nebraska. They opened up the second half scoring against Purdue last week. So we'll see if Nebraska goes on defense by their own choice for a third straight game.
Interesting.
I mean, Frost always wants the football, and they want to jump out. Nebraska's defense has done a really good job of carrying the water this year. So get out early, get an early score. Let's just see how much Minnesota wants to be in the winter wonderland. They're used to it, You got to focus in, and I wouldn't say this normally just because Captain Morgan from Minnesota has been really pretty good in his career. Doesn't have the weapons this year. Do you make him in this climate try and beat you throwing the ball? You've seen Nebraska's secondary be able to man up.
Yeah.
Did so well against Penn State's receiving corps. You know what they did against Bell and Rondale Moore last week. Do you just absolutely stack the box to make sure it's 2nd and 8? Every second down after that first down handoff to Mo Ibrahim? You can't let Mo get going downhill, right? Because Minnesota's going to hold the football. They're going to crank out first downs. They're going to try and run it. And the counter to that is you just load up extra sauce, so to speak, to stop the run. I think you do. If it's not working with your normal 3-4, or maybe you go 4-man front. I mean, that's Minnesota's offense this year's Mo Ibrahim, and he's been incredible.
Interesting.
And the last thought here, too, is get explosive on offense. Easier said than done, but look at what Nebraska's been able to do as they've progressed a little bit on offense. Assuming there's no flag on the play that negates a 30-yard gain, which has happened. You saw Nebraska with Betts on the little jet sweep crank out a 45-yard air quote pass for a big touchdown, explosive play against Penn State. You saw Wandale get loose a few times last week in with some big plays. You saw some nice runs by Adrian against Purdue. You also saw Austin Allen down the seam that could have been a 60-yard touchdown. So Nebraska's explosive plays are obviously key to this offense, but they're getting more consistent with that. Minnesota allows 7.5 yards per play. That is the worst in football. So despite the climate today, that is there based on what film shows and says for the Minnesota defense. Real simple. Get out early, get your lead, get comfortable, get settled in. Shut down Ibrahim. He can't be going Ricky Williams 1998 on you. And then find a way to get explosive plays in the offense, either with the quarterback run game, with Mills running the football, get your tight ends involved, find Wandale over the middle again to get him some stuff after the catch. And you've got to match and exceed the physicality, period, end of discussion. That's what Minnesota was all about last year. They came out without hoodies and without sleeves, and they were all about the polar bear type weather in Minneapolis last year. Nebraska's got to be every inch as physical. They have shown the ability to embrace that. They did that absolutely through lots of this season. They've been as physical, and they've matched that physicality against Iowa. They were way more physical than Purdue. They were physical enough against Penn State. They showed good physicality against Ohio State this year. The game that they didn't show up from a physicality standpoint and they got owned on the line of scrimmage was against Illinois. That memory is still burned not only into the fan base, but the players don't want a letdown, a similar type letdown against Minnesota today. But you got to come out and you just got to be able to stand up to what Minnesota has been pretty good at under Fleck, and that's being good strength-wise on the lines of scrimmage. Nebraska has the dudes that can do that. When I think of Robinson, I think of Rogers, I think of Snacks, I think of Steele, I think of Honus, I think of Nebraska's secondary. I mean, I look at both safeties and Dismuke and Deontay Williams. Those guys are physical. Cam Taylor-Britt's physical. Boodle, physical for a corner. So I think Nebraska's got the dudes and the mentality. They just got to go out and do it. Now, what you can't have either, as we'll hear from the Pirate coming up, Mike Leach with us, you can't let Minnesota just hang around. And it's very simply said, but the longer you let a team just kind of hang around, maybe Minnesota says, we traveled, it's cold outside, might as well try and just win this damn thing. Don't give them any hope. Don't let them hang around. Come out and just put the hammer down. Simply said, that's how it needs to work today for Nebraska as they kick off on FS1 at 11 o'clock. But a couple thoughts from you, Willie J. First on hoops, second on football. You feeling good about football first? Secondly, Nebraska basketball. You're a diehard Husker Hoops fan. Again, you have a Mikey Moore jersey. And are you discouraged about last night? Two spectrums there.
Yeah, let me start with football. Schmidt, you nailed it. I think I want to see Wandale taking those semi-deep passes.
Just give me the dig route, baby.
Yes.
Give me the 9-yard over the middle. Good luck trying to stay with him. Let him hit the air brakes. They'll fly right by. He is so quick and explosive, changing direction. He's fun, man.
Oh, my God.
He is fun, and they're getting him the football.
Yeah. I mean, last year, that trip to Minnesota seemed pointless.
Did you go?
To be honest, I did.
I did, too. Me and Searles were up there drinking Grain Belt and going, what the hell's going on here?
It wasn't good. It wasn't good. The one thing that I'm thinking about this game is the last time that we won, we came out flat against Illinois. It was awful. So I want to see how this team reacts to this second win, see if it's any different. I hope it's different. I expect it to be different. And basketball, Schmitty, man, that was it's nothing that we haven't seen before. It's seemed like an average trip to Creighton, even though there was no fans there. Creighton's a good team, man.
They're nails. Yeah. They can shoot. They can get out in transition. They are very, very talented. Mm-hmm. But I see Nebraska's talent. It just wears you out when there's 25 turnovers. And think about it. I mean, you had 15 against Georgia Tech. You had 11, I think, against South Dakota. You're just not taking care of the basketball. And it's just simple entry passes or getting the ball picked from you. Yeah. And then it snowballs.
That's what Fred said. He said it's fundamentals. Those are the one things that you have to have down. But the Creighton game, I don't know, Schmitty. I don't really remember the end of it, to be honest.
So was that good a night?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
The Modelos were rolling, playing some poker with some friends.
You're a Modelo guy. Are you the dark Modelo or the regular Modelo?
Just the regular, baby.
My man, I'm a Modelo guy. We're a big Mexican beer fan in the Schmidt household.
It's good.
You a lime or no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So how many Modelos did we have?
A couple tall boys, a couple cans.
Okay, just two?
Well,
you didn't match beer per turnover last night.
No, it was about 7 or 8. We'll put it that way. It was
good for you.
Early in bed.
The Modelo sleeper for Willie J. Did you have trouble sleeping last night? No, my friend Modelo came over and helped me.
It was awesome.
Well done, Willie J. We'll take a quick time out and rewind coming up on the weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio, ESPN Lincoln. Our chat with the Pirate, Mike Leach. You'll love this. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Early to rise with Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Here's Chris Schmidt and Mark Kranek.
Hello.
Coach, you doing all right?
Yeah, shoot, we're getting ready to go out to practice, get ready for another one here,
Well, that's the way it is, and I got to ask you, how's it worked out for you? Mike Leach with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. You're down to slim and none when it comes to your scholarship numbers. How have you navigated that the last couple of weeks? Got Auburn this weekend.
Yeah, we're gaining ground a little. We're still below the limit or whatever, but anyways, it is what it is. And then, so it's kind of mixed. I mean, on one hand, you don't want to be shorthanded, but the other hand, you really don't want to miss the opportunity to play,
Well, that's kind of the message here in Lincoln. Scott Frost and Nebraska have been very adamant all year, obviously, about playing ball. And it's not gone well some weekends. It's gone well other weekends, but it's about getting better, and you get better by playing. Has that been your message to your kids?
Yeah, that's totally been our message. And the thing is with all the disruption, I mean, it's, it's pretty difficult to consistently perform at the level you'd like, and of course we're a very young team, so that was going to be an adventure anyway. But the thing is you still want to get those reps in. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff happening out there, and we've got guys getting better and things like that, and you really want to continue that.
Coach, how do you stay patient with youth? You can see flashes, and this isn't your first rodeo building a program.
It's up and down. It's highs and lows. I mean, it's really exciting to see them improve, and then there'll be some bonehead thing that you look out there and you say, I can do that myself, which, it's just, it is, I mean, it's both extremes. Very fulfilling and very frustrating.
I got to ask you: Are you in a kitchen or a kind of a work / break room? You got some rattling around going on.
Here's what's going on here. You'll like this. Okay, so
it's a cowbell.
So I'm signing stuff, footballs and cowbells. And see, we're a big cowbell university. So I'm signing some cowbells, and they sound like this. So we got a bunch of cowbells here, and so I'm signing some for the good folks of Mississippi State.
I like that, the cowbell. And I don't have just the instrumental to Don't Fear the Reaper, but man, I wish I did, because you could play along.
We could for sure.
Mike Leach with us on Hail Varsity Radio. So I want to jump into the transfer portal with you on how that is to navigate in 2020, and if you put your college football czar hat on, would you have it as wide open as it is, or are you just dealing with it?
Just deal with it. I mean, I'm just dealing with it. That's all you can do. I mean, the transfer, you wonder if you're going to have a transfer portal, maybe we ought to, as teams or coaches, you ought to be able to transfer some guys if they don't hold up their end,
So cutting folks that aren't living up to expectations?
Yeah, I mean, guy says, hey, I want to go somewhere where I can play. Or, there's some guys, sometimes a certain amount are just malcontent type of guys that you just missed on, you're just wrong about. And then the guy transfers, they want a different school. Well, we might want a different player,
What's that like for you when it comes to making contact with a kid? Obviously, you want to see him in person and evaluate. You can't do that in 2020. But just overall, through your experience...
Honestly, most of the players that we've had transfer are guys that are looking for an opportunity to play for the most part. Not all, for the most part. They're looking for a chance. They're down the depth chart. They just want a chance to play. And I think that's more legitimate. There are some cut and run guys. There's no question about that. But I think that, they're talking about some rule where everybody gets a free transfer for 1 year, doesn't have to sit. Well, then if they do that, then everybody will just strictly recruit off the transfer portal,
Yeah.
So I think they need to be careful with this. I mean, because, when I was in college, hell, I wanted to cut and run a lot, It's like, oh, this is hard. Yeah, it's hard. And then, but, there's a certain amount of growth and benefit to persevering and pushing through, and the ability to do that is something that you learn. You're not just born with. And I think that having to push through provides its own rewards, and I think that that's a important thing that we need to make sure doesn't get lost.
Few minutes, Mike Leach with us, Hail Varsity Radio, head coach Mississippi State. Big showdown with Auburn this weekend, and Coach right now is signing cowbells for all the Mississippi State fans, and I'm sure a few Husker fans would send a cowbell your way if they had one. I got to ask you, with the conversation, when it comes to a kid, have you had kids look in the eye and say, Coach, here's my reason? And then does the conversation stay positive? Do you get ticked off? Does the kid get an attitude? You've had all instances, I'm sure.
What the first part of the question? What did you say? When
it comes to the transfer part, do you have kids come tell you themselves, or is it just something you find out after the fact?
Both. But they to go on the portal, they go to compliance. So you, even if they don't come to you, you hear from compliance that they're going to, and some kids, I mean, it's all shapes and sizes. Sometimes the guy's just discouraged and you need to pep him up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the guy's a bad attitude guy and he beats you to the portal before, you were inclined to encourage him to move on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a guy down the depth chart that you really have kind of a lot of admiration for, that tries hard, plays hard, does everything you ask him. He just wants an opportunity to play. And then at least in my case, I actively will call around and try to, find some people to, that would be a good opportunity for him. And then some have just been guys that, I don't know, like a young guy just gets discouraged prematurely, and rather than stick it out, where, odds are high he would have been successful if he kept pushing and kept trying. He didn't give himself that ample opportunity. Goes on the transfer portal, and those type of guys, you'll see them on the portal again the following year. Some guys are perpetual portal guys, and I think that's a bad approach.
What's an instance? You said that there were times you wanted to cut and run. Who gave you the advice to stick it out? Obviously, you've had moments where you've had to persevere through things, but is there a moment you think back to, either undergrad, law school, coaching, whatever?
Well, I went to college. I graduated in 8 semesters, which is a little quicker than I'd recommend. I should have smelled the roses more. About 17. I should have smelled the roses more, but it's all the same thing with everybody. If you think about it, it's really, generally speaking, it's the same with everybody. You have a bad day, you feel sorry for yourself. You got all of a sudden, a midterm, a paper, and 2 other papers, and then a surprise pop quiz, all the stuff. You get overwhelmed with your academics. You start to feel sorry for yourself. You think maybe I should do something else. Is it all worth it? You start to feel sorry for yourself. 4 years of school, or in my case, if you go to law school, that's a long time. You feel sorry for yourself. you just got to boost yourself up. And I found that just kind of trying to be around positive people, listening to positive people that have achieved things, I could draw my own encouragement out of that. Some of it was subtle. Some of it's just maybe a nice person or a stranger you met. Mm-hmm. Some of it were friends that I could confide in. Basically, they just listen and you get it off your chest, and just by articulating it, you create your own clarity to a situation. I can't say I was always right, but I think that it definitely helped, and it offered me a chance to make the right decision a lot of times. And I don't know, you just got to keep pushing. You got to keep showing up, and all you can do every day is believe in yourself and do the best you can. And I think in the end, that'll take you quite far.
Mike Leach with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, hang on the line. If you got a couple more minutes, we'll get into some more signing topics, some of the things you've signed that's unique in your career. Mike Leach with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, sitting in, getting ready for practice, signing cowbells. We could play Name That Tune, but I want to ask you, what's the coolest or the most unique thing you've signed in your career? And I know there's a lot of books out there, Swing Your Sword, that have autographs.
I don't know about cool, but unique was okay. So I was at a signing. At Texas Tech, and after the spring game, we would have autograph signing. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so there's a lady back there, an older lady, and she's a big older lady, and she comes up and kind of laughing and blushing, and she comes up and she holds up this bra.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, this bra, we're talking volleyball size, okay? I don't know what the letters of the alphabet would be, but
multiple D's.
It's that higher volleyball, okay? and so then and she's sort of embarrassedly laughing as she did it, and then you can see by her T-shirt that was the one that she wore to the game that day. Okay, because you can see that at some point it was pulled off, and then behind her, or kind of and I'm assuming her adult kids, because they're younger than her, but her adult kids. It's almost like mom lost a bet or something, or they dared her or something. And so they're back there just laughing, right? And she brings up the bra and says, "Would you sign this?" Well, I'm happy to sign nearly everything. And so, yep, sure enough, I signed a big bra.
So you got to sign a bra, but have you ever had to sign, or I shouldn't say have to, have you been asked to sign cleavage before?
I went at the top, kind of between the neck and the cleavage. I agreed to shoot high. Okay,
yeah, sure.
I did have a guy come up one time, and no, I mean, as long as he enjoys it, I guess it's a good thing. But he has me sign his arm.
Okay.
Autograph his arm, because he's planning as soon as it's as soon as it's done. From there, he's going to go get it tattooed on his arm.
Okay.
And I thought tattooing my signature to an arm, I wouldn't encourage anyone to. I would think very carefully about a move like that, but hopefully he's still satisfied with my signature tattooed to his arm.
Back to the aiming high portion of the interview between cleavage and neck. Was the technique solid? Were you shaky or not?
No, not shaky at all. Not shaky at all, but I'm left-handed,
Okay.
so it's naturally kind of a shaky signature to begin with. Left-handers will relate to this because if it's going to smear, you're kind of screwed. You don't get to rest. You don't get to rest your hand down while you write like a righty does, because a lefty, if you rest your hand down and write, it's going to smear it. You
Gotcha.
know.
Yes.
And so you try not to do that.
Coach, last thought before we let you go. Bowl picture. Everyone's able to go bowling. The bowl options continue to shrink. Do you guys think you'll have an opportunity? And could we get Moose on the horn and put together a Mississippi State Nebraska showdown somewhere?
I don't know. It sounds like, though, we will have the chance to go to a bowl just, because of the slots. Mm-hmm. I would be excited about another game, under any circumstances. And but it does look like we signed a thing the other day that, yes, we are excited to go to a bowl if given the opportunity.
Well, best of luck this weekend. You feel pretty good. Practice, I know you're going to head to the last practice before walkthrough and all that, but good week for you guys as Auburn rolls in?
I think we've had a pretty good week of practice. We need to keep progressing and keep getting better that way, but I think we have had a good week.
Well, Coach, keep signing those cowbells, and Merry Christmas to you and the family, and we'll do this again. Thanks for jumping on with us.
All right, absolutely. Always good to talk to you.
Pirates a party, man. That was quite fun and entertaining this week. Mike Leach, a lot of topics aside from signing bras and cowbells that Coach hit on, and coaches are dealing with it. Nebraska's dealing with it when it comes to the transfer portal and just guys that bounce out early. And as a coach, you got to approach it different ways. Does the guy need a arm around him to say, hey, just keep grinding, you'll get better? Is the guy frustrated because he's used to catching 15 passes a quarter in high school and ball's not coming to me, so I'm out? I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all issue. And you gotta play psychologist, you gotta play parent, you gotta play cheerleader, you gotta play reality check counselor as well for a lot of college football kids. And then you factor in that we may not play this Saturday because of COVID. I mean, we've all dealt with different situations this 2020 season, just in life and in work. And then it spills over to the entertainment and joy you get from sports. And think about being the athlete during this thing. That's what's so remarkable about what Nebraska's done. And I know that it's not been perfect, but the fact that they've had very few guys opt out, I mean, they haven't had any, but B, just the discipline this team has shown because of their head coach, because of the assistant coaches, just the program in general, how locked in and passionate they were. And that kind of emanated from just how vocal the head coach and the program and athletic director Moose, everybody was on the same page, but they fought to do this. And if you don't get what Nebraska did, Ohio State doesn't jump on board. You don't have the stodgy Big Ten reevaluate their rules this week to get your best playoff team a chance to stay in the playoff. I mean, it's kind of a trickle down. And even if you got out of the SEC, I mean, you hear Nebraska's voice and passion and backbone. That gave some hope and some life to a lot of programs that, don't kid yourself, even in SEC country or ACC country had to battle to get the green light. So now you fast forward to December 12th. You've come this far, you might as well just finish it out the right way if you're Nebraska for potentially your final home game of 2020. We have no earthly idea officially from the Big Ten what's going to happen next week for December 19th for Champions Weekend. You know it's Northwestern, you know it's Ohio State and Indy, but what else happens? Get through today, get another win, get closer to 500, make that postseason a reality to continue to better your program if you're Nebraska football. Show the ability to come out and keep momentum after a road win last weekend, get a home win, and send some of your seniors out the right way, and then just keep trucking forward. Hour 2 is on the way. Brandon Vogel coming up with Hail Varsity Radio.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Back to it, hour 2. It's weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Willie J. Mr. Mark Cranack is on assignment. Good stuff from Coach Leach earlier last hour. And we kind of broke down some thoughts on Nebraska-Minnesota. Briefly, recapped Nebraska-Creighton hoops. We welcome in a guy who was one hell of a point guard. And Vogues, what position did you play out in Western Nebraska in football?
Wide receiver and defensive back. So I was a prima donna.
No, did you enjoy defensive back or wideout more?
I did not enjoy defensive back very much. There was one game my freshman year where a couple of guys got hurt, a couple of seniors, and I got thrown out there as a freshman. I think drew two pass interference penalties. I may have argued one of them and may have gotten a sportsmanlike conduct penalty. So it started off bad. By the time we got to junior, senior year, I at least felt comfortable back there. But no, I was a guy who needed the rock to get going. So,
did you object to zone coverage? It's the best delicate way I can ask it.
No, I didn't, which probably tells you how good of a defensive back I was, especially at that level. It's kind of like playing man's easier, but, we had basically three coverages, a cover 2, a cover 3, and then kind of a mixture. So pretty much just rotated between one of those three most of the time. I think, this was pre-spread football, so teams weren't really slinging it around a whole lot out there either.
Brandon Vogel's with us, managing editor, HailVarsity.com and magazine, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. His book with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. So I like a little Al Bundy time, and you're a good dude, and I can't picture you losing your bleep and getting a 15-yard penalty on top of a 15. That was kind of like, I don't know, an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after hitting a dude out of bounds, on a Purdue sideline. 30 yards of penalties, courtesy of Vogues.
Well, yeah. Let me tell you, I couldn't believe it either. I thought I had a very good point to make. I thought it was spurious pass interference call to start with. Tried to explain myself, and that's why they have the whistle. And I have a mouthpiece.
Well, you took your helmet off. You grabbed his whistle. I'm kidding. So let's fast forward it to today. What point will a victory prove for Nebraska football? What does a win mean? Let's go big picture versus the small picture, because, man, this season could flip on its ear the right way after feeling a certain way a little less than a month ago.
Yeah, it really could, and this feels a little bit like, it's got some shades of the Illinois game, which maybe is not what people want to hear, but, Minnesota is expected to be at least somewhat shorthanded, haven't played in a while. Nebraska's at home, and it has a little bit of momentum. Can they just go out and kind of deal with the little bit of success they've had so far? And if they can, then you stack a little bit more on top of that, because all of a sudden you're looking at, if Nebraska wins here, The final record, sure, it'd be nice to get to 500 or even with the potential of a bowl game, maybe a winning record if you win out. But just the difference, like how far they've come already since that Illinois game, you're looking at get a win here, played Northwestern within 8, played Iowa within 6, didn't get the chance to measure yourself against Minnesota. All of a sudden that Illinois game looks a little bit like a really bad day. And that doesn't mean you can just throw it in the garbage and forget about it. It still happened, and it's still an issue. But things definitely would be trending up. You get that win today.
Brandon Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Your I-80 podcast is must listen to on the Hurrdat Media Network, and you drop that about every Thursday. So when folks get to go to games again, they can listen to it on their way to the stadium. What did you explore? What did you dive into deep dive wise with Minnesota? What is this Gopher team to you?
There's some shades of last year's Northwestern, which I think matters more when you turn the page to 2021. And we definitely don't need to go there yet. But they're elite, or at least achieving at an elite level offensively. Super efficient. The defining trait of Nebraska's offense so far this year is it has been on schedule a good amount of the time. Minnesota's even better in that regard. The defense is the complete opposite end of the spectrum, ranking the bottom 3 in all of kind of the success rate categories I look at each week. So spend some time on the podcast talking through that. It's come up a lot, but just their yards per play allowed and their yards per rush allowed are at the bottom of the heap nationally. So it would have been reasonable to expect some kind of decline for Minnesota's defense just with what they had to replace. But what we're seeing goes so far beyond that it feels a little bit like that Northwestern offense last year where they could stop anybody, but they couldn't move the ball a lick. So that's kind of what Nebraska's looking at. It should be able to move the ball on this one. But again, consistency is still the thing I think Nebraska needs to achieve the most. So you feel a little nervous, even if there's a lot in Nebraska's favor when they have the football.
There's been some insinuation, and this is more Big Ten Network guys, but you look at Fleck, he's in year 4. You had the Magic in year 3. They got the Auburn Bowl win. They beat Penn State. They fought tooth and nail against Iowa right after that week of success. And, look, Minnesota's 8th in the country. They could be a playoff team, and then they go get drilled for Paul Bunyan's axe to end the regular season and dash their West Division hopes. My question about Minnesota is this with their defense. Jerry Kill and Dilly Barr did an amazing job with Big Ten front sevens, and that's been a metamorphosis by Nebraska and Duval and the recruiting, and you look how much better Nebraska is defensively, physically. Is this just a down COVID year for Minnesota's front 7 defensively, or is this a sign of things to come where the old bar tab is almost closed with the body types Kill brought in?
Yeah, I'm not. It's not last call for me yet as far as Minnesota's defense goes. Kind of like I alluded to, I remember writing the yearbook preview for Minnesota way back in May when it seemed like we were full speed ahead for a relatively regular football season, and you could just look at that defense. I think it was 7 out of their top 8 tacklers from the previous year were gone, obviously, and then they lost one of the best cornerbacks in the country. So there was just a lot to replace there. So like I said, it was going to be a little bit of a learning year, I think, defensively, under the best of circumstances. And then you add this on top of it, and they don't quite have the playmakers that they've had recently in the front 7, and I think that's really the bigger deal. Like, they're just pretty young there, waiting for some of those guys to develop. Fleck's still recruited, and I don't know off the top of my head exactly the breakdown of offensive and defensive guys, but they're still recruiting at a pretty high level. So I think the talent level should be okay, but it's definitely, like I said, this one's a little bit hard to explain, even if you came in knowing, things aren't going to be what they were a year ago.
So let's go to the Minnesota offense. They put up numbers and points on folks, but it's, again, a far cry due to some departures and some opt-outs of what they were a year ago. They had a really good complementary football team, right? Nebraska's striving for that. Interested in your take with, is Nebraska able to kind of get back to form like they've shown the last 2 weeks against the run? To me, Vogues, it kind of breaks down to what does second down look like, right? Illinois had 2nd and 3, 3rd and 2 all day, and Peters did his thing with some short passes. They didn't go deep a whole ton, but Illinois got the run game going. A couple backs went over the century mark. Well, you've got Mo Ibrahim, who's really awesome and talented. Is Nebraska going to be able to make things difficult knowing what's coming and still be able to stop it with the Minnesota run game?
Yeah, I think that's the big question defensively. And if they are able to make it difficult, they should be in pretty good shape. If they don't, you might be in for a little bit of a score fest, even which you don't see often when there's some snow on the ground. So the game could unfold that way. Minnesota, so it ranks 18th, I think, in explosive passing plays. Last year it was top 5, and you had Tyler Johnson, Rashad Bateman. Don't have either of those guys. Johnson went to the draft, and Bateman, of course, opted out, then in, then back out, which, Fleck, to his credit, has been gracious no matter what the decision of the individual player was there. Still have Chris Ottman-Bell. He's kind of their big play guy, but he'll obviously draw some additional focus now without Bateman in the mix. So it really does come down to being able to keep Ibrahim contained and hold up against that run game. Gophers run it 72% of the time on first down, which is the highest in the Big Ten coming into this game. So you have a good sense of what they're going to do. It's kind of just you got to line up, and they know, the teams know that's what they're going to do, try and stop it. And you think back to last year, Minnesota had a great scheme for Nebraska, particularly in the ground game. Keeping them in 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, things like that is going to be essential because they start to get 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. And then the whole playbook's available, and they're really good with some of the RPO and play action stuff that they do. So Nebraska's best kind of defense for that might be to just eliminate that option as much as possible.
Brandon Vogel's with us on Hail Varsity Radio. At Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter is where you find him. His podcast, the I-80 podcast, must listen to. Great breakdown in Nebraska, Minnesota. So let's flip it around here. A thought on Cam Taylor-Britt specifically. You mentioned Ottman-Bell. We've seen Cam do his thing against the Penn State secondary. We saw Cam do his thing last weekend against Bell. I know there was the car wreck that turned into an 89-yard touchdown that made you reach for the vodka. That said, Cam Taylor-Britt's playing incredible football. And what were your expectations with him kind of moving full-time to corner? And who's he reminding you of? What type of level's he at, in your opinion, right now for Nebraska in that secondary?
Yeah, so the move to corner, I guess, full-time inserted a little bit of uncertainty, but I kind of entered this season thinking Cam Taylor-Britt has the potential, he might already be, but certainly has the potential to be Nebraska's best player. And I think that's kind of where he's gotten to this season. You start to think about 2021 a little bit, and who knows, with everybody able to come back, who actually will. That's going to be a huge question nationwide, but I think going into next year, he has solidified himself as really one of the kind of hearts of the team, and certainly one of the most talented players Nebraska has. And what's interesting about that, he's kind of a huge recruiting win, I think, for this staff, where maybe you haven't had as many of those so far that have declared themselves as where everyone can agree, yeah, they're a huge win. In terms of players, it reminds me of, I'm trying to think, Nebraska's had some really, really good corners and just defensive backs, even recently. And I've said, often before, I think that's a position Nebraska can really succeed in terms of recruiting. So Cam Taylor-Britt kind of keeps that going a little bit. Kind of reminds me of Seontae Evans a little bit, maybe not playing at quite that high a level yet, but I think he has that type of potential.
He does. Vogues, before we get out, I want to get your take on Nebraska's offense and from a physicality standpoint, how they can match up. I mean, the lines of scrimmage are your deal makers today. How those play out are going to tell you the story of a win or a loss today for Nebraska against Minnesota. And it's been well documented with what Minnesota's allowing per play, 7.5 per, just snap it, bang it, 2nd and 3. Easier said than done, specifically with some weather, right? So Nebraska's attack, do you see more of a lean on Mills today, or do you look at kind of the 1-2 punch with McCaffrey and Adrian in the quarterback run? Does Nebraska change much approach-wise from what they wanted to do against Purdue, looking forward here, running the ball against Minnesota?
Yeah, I don't know that they changed much, but I'm kind of going into this one looking at Mills's carries, or really just carries outside of the quarterbacks as a little bit of a health check on how things are going. Because as you mentioned, Nebraska should be able to have some success running the football. Too often, really going back into last year, a lot of Nebraska's success over the past 2 seasons has been from the run game. I know Mills finished the season strong there, and you felt like maybe they turned a corner, and then he didn't get to play a ton in the middle of this short season. But Nebraska's still, I think, leaning more on the quarterbacks in the run game than they would like to. This is one where all of the numbers say, and just watching the games that Minnesota has played previously, teams have been able to have success running the ball. So if Nebraska doesn't, I don't think it's necessarily a death knell for winning the game, certainly. But it would raise some flags, I think, on just where this offensive line is at here at the end of this regular season and how much farther it needs to go. And that's been a big question this year. Just the offensive line play as a whole, I don't think it's been quite as good as many expected, and I would put myself in that category as well. So here's one where you should be able to be pretty good. Now you got to go out and do it.
The senior class, give me a word to describe them.
Adaptable, which may not, I guess,
that makes sense.
Ross used the word tough, and that's certainly it too. It's, you just think of kind of the emotional swings for guys who were recruited by a previous staff, but all of the, I'm sure the players, much like all of Nebraska and kind of college football as a whole, was looked at the Frost hire and was like, oh, this is gonna turn around quick, and it hasn't. And to fight through that, is certainly hard. I thought Brendan Hymas talking, saying what he said this week about how he wanted to see it through. He didn't want to be the guy who left because things got hard. I think you've got that sort of group, and tip of the cap to them for those that are still here and stuck it out.
Brandon Vogel's with us. Catch his reaction, hailvarsity.com, and read him on the magazine. Can subscribe to Hail Varsity Magazine and .com, bundle that, and give that gift that keeps on giving. It's better than the Jelly of the Month Club, I guarantee you that. 8553-HUSKER, hailvarsity.com/subscribe this holiday season. Vogues, enjoy your football Saturday with Nebraska, and thanks for jumping on this morning, man.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Brandon Vogel with us, Hail Varsity Radio Weekend Edition. We'll run down the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Willie J has got his throwback Big Red lid on. We'll talk a little hoops, a little football, some recruiting with Sharpie. We are 25 minutes away from Cousin Dino. His prediction, Cousin Dino's been on the money. Will he remain so? Before we get out of here, it's Hail Varsity Weekend presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7 1/2 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Back to it, weekend edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. A snow-filled Saturday. It's Nebraska, it's Minnesota. And we welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Sharp, did you get the shovel out this morning?
You know what? Not yet. I'm waiting for the warm-up to take care of my shoveling, but wow, this is supposed to be Nebraska-Minnesota. It's supposed to be a little snow, right? We're supposed to eat a little dilly bar on the sidelines. I mean, welcome to football.
Brother, dilly bar was go-to. I'm kind of a blizzard guy, but with Clay's doing the dilly bar thing and that Hoth system, look-alike, that fateful Saturday. I think it was Ohio State in Minnesota, where everybody who had HDTV back then was like, man, this was sweet. And a good ball game. Minnesota fell, obviously, during the Kill administration. But, wow, fast forward to today, and a lot of things have been said. Nebraska seems to be kind of gathering some momentum. Nice win last weekend. And the ability to kind of power through some adversity when things got tight. Do you have any grasp on what Minnesota shows up at all?
No, this game's tough to forecast until 30 minutes before kickoff to see exactly who's going to be out there for Minnesota. I imagine that there'll be a position group that will be pretty young in terms of inexperience that will be forced to play. I don't believe, if you listen to the coaches talking, that their main skill guys will be absent. But if they only have 55 players, I mean, you haven't played in a couple of weeks. You went 10 days without practicing. I mean, this sets up really well for Nebraska, but you can't drink the poison. And I think maybe Nebraska learned their lesson a couple of weeks ago. But this is all about Nebraska today, to continue to make some progress and try and turn this season into, at the end of the day, when you can say it's a success.
Gary Sharp's with us, the Iron Horse, Hail Varsity Radio weekend. It is a different narrative, a different feel. And let's go back to last Saturday, Sharpie, and just kind of the joy you saw. You saw two post games in the Big Ten last Saturday. You saw joy and hugs, and we love this guy in Camp Randall with Coach Allen in Indiana. And then you saw the same thing with guys when Frost was doing his post game with Pizzo on BTN, where you just saw the joy on the face of so many guys to go get a win. This team wants it so bad, and it's been hard to come by to get wins. But back to that momentum and that lesson learned, better late than never, I guess, Gary, with Nebraska's focus. And last year, how much of the beatdown carries over to this year? Not just the revenge side, but just remembering what happened, just getting out physical. Is that something Nebraska's been able to draw from as they get ready for today?
Well, I think that was part of the learning experience throughout the Big Ten, and that's one thing that's pretty evident this year is Nebraska physically in the trenches looks more like a Big Ten team where they will be able to withstand a Minnesota team that prides themselves on being physical. I don't know. P.J. Fleck is still on the sidelines. There's that weird curiosity that Nebraska has with P.J. Fleck. They did some things last year. They were a good team, and they exploited some holes in Nebraska's defense last year. And, you kind of look at Minnesota's defense this year. They look like the 2019 Nebraska defense. They can't stop any running backs. They can't tackle. They can't set edges. I think I go back to it's all about Nebraska. Nebraska, it's very rare they've won back-to-back games, especially in the conference. And, there's only one time that I can really put my finger on where Nebraska had momentum during the course of a season, and that was at the end of Scott's first season, where they beat Minnesota. You remember that game in 2018 where I think Adrian Martinez had his best game as a Husker, and I kind of have that feel today on how that game went, how today is going to go. But then the way that finished up, Ohio State wins against Illinois, Michigan State, the way the Iowa game played out, but you haven't been able to recapture that momentum. And there's a serious chance to grab some momentum with the way you've played post-Illinois at Iowa, Purdue, win today, Rutgers next week more than likely, and then see what happens if there's a bowl game to be had, and you've got some momentum. So this is about Nebraska today, to continue to get better. Don't need wild plays, just need steps forward so that you can sell the process going into 21.
Gary Sharp is with us, Hail Varsity Radio weekend. Let's talk position group, and we kind of spent a second on it with the physicality side of things. But take a second and let's pat the defensive line on the back, specifically Coach Tuioti and Coach Duvall, really. Just what Nebraska's got up front. That'll be key today. That'll be key moving forward in the Big Ten. But, touch on the job he's done and the development that's occurred.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think if you are handing out raises, Tony Tuioti is first in line. The way he has developed his group of guys, the way that he has recruited as well, and he's only been here for a couple of years, and he was an outsider. There was no connection to Scott Frost when he got hired. And we looked at his position and said, okay, they're starting to look like Big Ten bodies. I'll check back in 21. Well, Tony Tuioti said, not so fast. We're going to show you that we're not going to get blown off the ball against the likes of Ohio State and Northwestern and Iowa, and my group is going to develop as the season goes along, and he's absolutely right. He's gotten a fantastic year out of Ben Stilley. Interior, Ty Robinson has played well at times. Casey Rogers has really come on and has expanded his game where he's going to be someone you count on. And then Damian Daniels. Damian Daniels is really kind of the sign of the Tuioti development. Here's a guy that last year couldn't play a lot of consecutive snaps, and he wasn't great technique-wise. He would have one play and then two plays bad. Well, all of a sudden, he goes up against Linderbaum, the NFL center for Iowa, and holds his own and wins a couple of those battles, and then plays well last week against Purdue. You can see him coming. That's a group that you'd be nice you don't have to worry about going into 21. I think they've made a great development, and that's also helped the rest of that defense. It's helped the linebackers develop as well because it's kept them clean, and they're just part of a defense that the defense of Nebraska is going to be what it is. It's a bend, don't break. It's not going to be a continual top 10 defense. They're going to do enough. Man, they have done a lot this year. Probably Eric Chinander and his whole group of coaches and players needs a little bit more love because Nebraska has shown significant progress on defense. Not where we all want them to be, but they've definitely kept Nebraska in football games outside of one hiccup against Illinois.
Gary Sharp's with us. Sharpie, you look at the conditions outside. You look at Minnesota with Morgan, a far cry this year from last year due to COVID and 2020 being what it is. You lost some outside help that graduated and went to the league with Minnesota's offense. It was just incredible last year, but you still got big old Mo running the football. Level of concern out of 10 with Mo running the ball today against this Nebraska front.
Well, he's probably going to run it 30 times, and he's really good. You think about it, he's, for the last couple of years, split carries, and he's 9th all-time at a school that's produced some really good running backs, kind of sneaky development of running backs that have gone on to play in the league. He's really good. He's going to be the running back of the year. Their offensive line isn't what it was last year. I mean, this is a weird football team. They had the offseason with COVID. They also had, you're in Minneapolis. You have a lot of social issues that are going on, and Minnesota was right there in the middle of it. Then you had, when the season was stopped, you had almost a sense of relief. Thank you for Big Ten looking out for us. And then you had to ramp it up again. You had more COVID issues. You had opt-outs. You lost your best player in Bateman. It's a weird team. They'll come to compete. P.J. Fleck won't let them roll over. But they've got issues across the board outside of Morgan and Ibrahim. Defense, what we just were talking about. I mean, look at special teams. Special teams for Minnesota is a nightmare. They've only attempted 3 field goals. They've only made 2 of them. They haven't kicked a field goal longer than 41 yards in the last 2 years, and 58 of their last 60 punts have gone less than 50 yards. So they're a work in progress. I think they get a COVID mulligan after what they did last year. But keep an eye on Minnesota because they've lost a lot of that defensive talent from last year that belonged to the Kill and Clay's era that P.J. Fleck's got to replenish the cupboard on defense. But they'll play hard today. I think this is where Nebraska can't fall into that hole of, we should beat them. We're a 10.5-point favorite. Hey, you learned your lesson a couple of weeks ago. Nebraska needs to come out like they did against Purdue, start fast, have quarterback play with Martinez that is smart and efficient. You don't need a bunch of wow plays. Plus, it helps that Dedrick Mills is back. Boy, he takes a whole lot of stuff off the plate of Adrian Martinez and that whole offense when you have Mills that is hitting the holes and running and doing all the things that he does, from running the ball to blocking and picking up blitzes.
Sharpie, a thought with Nebraska's progress, and let's focus on the offensive side. I mean, Nebraska's defense did a great job a week ago against some explosive guys, D'ing up, rallying to the football, three Husker hats around the ball carrier. So that looked really good. That looked similar to Iowa. That looks similar to Northwestern. That looks similar to Ohio State. Illinois is kind of on its own island with that performance. But Nebraska's passing game, the short game, Adrian's looked really crisp the last couple of weeks. Touch on the wide receiver development, and just, hey, someone's doing a drag route, Sharpie, over the middle for some yards after catch, and that guy's named Wandale.
Well, you think about it. Adrian has been on fire the last 2 games in his completion rate. And, he's nearly 71% for the season. He's still going to have the issue of throwing the ball downfield. He's 12 of 24 with any passes that travel 10 yards or more. So that's an issue. But they've said, you know what, we're not going to say let's go wow with him. Let's do what he does best, and let's get the ball in the hands of Wandale Robinson and let Wandale Robinson do what he does best. And that's been a huge benefit for Nebraska. And then you've seen Betts come along, and you've seen other wide receivers that know what they're doing, and they're the only ones playing that have really helped Martinez. So the offense isn't anywhere near what we think it's going to be, but for what they need right now, just to simply win football games, I think it's efficient enough, and it really benefits Adrian Martinez. And, boy, he has changed the conversation in that position in the last couple of weeks. It was only a week ago Mackenzie Milton's name was mentioned all over the place. Now we're talking about, is Adrian Martinez back to the old Adrian Martinez, that maybe he needed a preseason camp and a spring ball, and he got it in the first couple of games. He got to the bench, realized what was going on, and now we're starting to see this stage of Adrian Martinez's career.
Sharpie, I want to go to recruiting. I know you got your finger on the pulse of recruiting. Early signing days Wednesday. Thoughts on where Nebraska's at with their defensive line chase, and comment on the Avante Dickerson situation. What may be likely with him, the tremendous talent out of West Side that's currently committed to the Gophers.
Well, I think Buckley was a good pickup last week, just to add to that defensive line mix. It's a top 20 class. I don't know that it's a wow class. You do have the number 1 tight end in the country. I think Nebraska's not done. They could add to it on the defensive line. They could add to it, of course, through the portal. They could add to it in February. But it's where Nebraska should be recruiting. But this will be a class that is going to need some guys that are developed quickly. With Avante Dickerson, who committed back to Minnesota back in April, sight unseen, it's until Avante Dickerson says something, we can all speculate. I've gotten to know him. He keeps a lot of things close to the vest. He lets other people talk. Kobe Bretz is very close to him. That's a huge pickup for Nebraska. I don't know what's going to happen on Wednesday. I still tend to believe that Avante Dickerson is going to follow through. He's pretty loyal and sign with Minnesota. But that's something to keep an eye on until we get to Wednesday. If he elects not to sign with Minnesota, if he elects to wait, then that's something up with Nebraska. It doesn't necessarily mean it's just Avante Dickerson. Nebraska may have something else in the mix when it comes to defensive backs, but it's about to get wild with recruiting. It's kind of snuck up on us the early signing period, and you have some decisions on seniors. Who's going to stay, who's going to go, what that does to your roster, what that does to certain guys that are behind seniors that are thinking they'll get to play in 21. The next couple of weeks are going to be really interesting with college football. And then remember, when the portal opens up and everybody gets a free transfer, watch out. Wild, wild west.
It is. And I look at some of the seniors that, as well as Nebraska's defense has progressed, think of, again, not to put 2020 to bed with Minnesota week 9 and then maybe a bowl game for Nebraska, but think of where this defense is at, and think if you get that bonus year, and I don't know if you'll get it with Doman, or maybe you would with Stilley, but you look at Honus and Stilley and, of course, Doman, and then you've got both your safeties are really physical and have done a nice job. I think both your safeties probably move on. But, man, if you could get a little bonus step here with Honus and those 2 other guys I mentioned, your defense could really, really be something, better than special next year.
Yeah, it's positions you wouldn't have to worry about. I think those individuals worry about my future. Am I ready to go into the real world and give a crack at the NFL? Or some of them look in the mirror, Schmitty, and they go, man, I'm 23, 24. I've been here for 5 years. I'm ready to move on. I've done everything I've done in my career, and I feel like I'm leaving the program in a good place. But you're right. There's a couple of those guys that you say, hey, what do you think about spending another year in Lincoln? I'll tell you a guy that will be a close watch will be Dedrick Mills. I thought he was going to run off to the NFL after this year, get a lot on tape. It didn't happen because of injuries. But you can see, now that he's been back the last couple of weeks, how important he is for Nebraska. In a running back room that has been besieged by injuries and some absences, you don't know, if it's not Dedrick Mills, guys, you don't know who the number one running back is in 21. There's no guy that has established himself. There's running backs there, but, man, that would be a luxury to have Dedrick Mills come back in 21. But he's also somebody that I believe next year would roll around, and he'd be 24 years old. And don't discount that. That's a big thing in guys' lives in terms of, okay, I'm getting up there. It's time to get into the real world or go to the NFL or what position I play. I don't want to put as much wear and tear on the tires. Mills certainly hasn't done that this year. He's a guy I would, if you're Nebraska, you'd love to have. But I think that's kind of a toss-up because I know he has aspirations of playing in the NFL.
It is a thing with the mileage number in college before you go to the NFL because you put a ton of mileage on as a ball carrier or as a situational guy in the league. If you can find your way as kind of a part of a 1-2 lead back punch in the league. Gary Sharp's with us. Sharpie, to the running backs real quick. If Mills is done, this is the send-off for him, assuming Nebraska doesn't get a home 9th game. Scott, Johnson, Morrison, or who else? I mean, who of these guys that we haven't seen a ton of this year, who do you feel best about to complement Nebraska's run game in the future? Of the young pups, who can maybe step forward or who's a candidate to do that and maybe separate himself?
Well, you got Tompkins in the mix as well. I'll be curious. Morrison could be a go. I mean, is cleared to play today. You might see him. And we've kind of all been anticipating what he might be like. I think Ramir Johnson is one to watch. When Ramir has gotten his chance, we've seen what he can do. We've seen what Marvin Scott can do. It's just a room that if there's no Mills, you're really going to have to figure out roles for these guys. Are they inside, outside guys? What to do with them? That's another thing with Nebraska moving forward is, can Nebraska find that true number one running back that you rely on? Because it seems like Nebraska's been in a stretch for a while, maybe for a decade or so, where you don't have that true number one. Mills was supposed to be that guy. This year is a wash, in my opinion, running back. But in the future, can Nebraska get that guy? But there's guys there. I don't know that anybody has performed behind Mills that you would go, well, that guy's the leader in spring to be the number one running back. But maybe it'll play out over the next couple of days. But if we get to see Morrison, I'll be very curious to see what kind of Savion Morrison we see from the tape we saw as a record-setting running back in Tulsa.
Dude, that guy can ball. You've just been waiting to see him at the college level. Last thought, Sharpie. Thanks again. Gary Sharp with us. Isaac Zadiska, Elkhorn South. Status on him in Nebraska. What's your feel there? A guy can play ball. He can snap the ball.
Yeah, he's pretty tenacious. I've watched him for 3 years on that really good offensive line at Elkhorn South. He's been very patient. I think the pandemic and not being able to get out and about and for coaches to come watch him play has hurt him. Now, like Missouri recently offered him a walk-on spot. They're looking at tape. I think there's a chance with Nebraska. Of course, Dad John and Uncle Rob, they would love him to play at Nebraska. Matt Hoskinson's son, who also is at Elkhorn South, just got a walk-on offer from Nebraska. We will see with Isaac. He's a really good player. You get him in your program, he's going to work hard, he's going to develop, and he's going to make you say no to him in terms of limiting his playing ability. We'll see. I think that's one to watch. Nebraska's interested, but Isaac does have a couple of really good options. Speaking of which, I think, kind of lost maybe a little bit in the euphoria of beating Purdue and the way Nebraska started and the way they held on. Cameron Jurgens didn't have a bad snap on Saturday. Can we do it 2 in a row today with the conditions being a little bit different?
You're right on it. Give me good snaps. If you're a Nebraska fan, take care of that football with the Winter Wonderland. Gary Sharp. Sharpie, we'll see you on the 6th floor here shortly. Thanks for the time today.
As always, Schmitty, thank you. Happy holidays.
You too, buddy. There he is, Gary Sharp with us, the Iron Horse. It's Hail Varsity Radio. A quick timeout. We'll wind down the weekend edition. Cousin Dino on the way with his prediction up next.
Early to rise with Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Here's Chris Schmidt and Mark Kranek.
Well, the folks in the desert have dropped the line. The line now 8.5. Nebraska favored. Aye. Let's welcome in Cousin Dino, the biggest and best Nebraska fan, the man with the RV that's been to every game that he's possibly been able to be allowed into. We welcome in Cousin Dean Schmidt. Dino, good morning. It's snowy in Lincoln. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. Just thinking this morning about how much fun this segment has been for me, particularly as I look back over, the particular opponent we're playing that week. And I was wanting you to phone another cuz after that Illinois game, but I'll stay on for another week or two if you don't mind.
It worked out. We felt good about Purdue. Iowa was Iowa. And, the Illinois game is... We can't burn that out of our memories. That said, You got a chance to do the right thing today if you're Nebraska football. What do you make of the line dropping from 10.5 down to 8.5? That's the number I've got in front of me this morning on ESPN.
Well, I took it at 11 originally.
Of course you did.
I'd sure like to have it at 8, but... I don't know. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the history of the games. I really don't know. I do have a couple questions for you this morning. If we look back in history, the teams that we've owned, what's a couple that come to mind? And I'll assist you if you get stumped here. But,
Kansas and Kansas State and Iowa State.
Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Minnesota was one of those teams, too. You perhaps don't know it, but we owned them 16 straight during the period of time from 63 to 2012. But Minnesota also leads, and I think they may be the only team that we played historically that leads us in the series from 1900 till now.
They cranked out some national championship things in the 60s, and they were good in the 50s, and they were pretty good post-World War II. So, they were pretty nice. Now, we were talking yesterday about the time that the triplets, Rozier, Gill, and Fryer had to go back in because the backups got tired in 83, an 84-13 win at the Metrodome.
That was this on my list. But, two things. Minnesota gave us our worst home loss ever, 61-7, and then we gave them their worst loss in Minnesota, 84-13, and I was there. That was some kind of game.
Some thoughts today. Dean Schmidt with his cousin Dino, his prediction on Hail Varsity. So I'm going to bring the Barry Switzer fur coat for your cutout today, just so you're warm in the north end zone. But break this down for me. What happens and why does Nebraska win? And did you take the points? Did you give the points?
Well, I took the points, and I've got us winning 34-20 today, Chris. I think it's one of those moments we start the rollover process all over again, and we give them a little payback from last year, and it's going to be a Husker win.
34-20 is what Cousin Dino says. Now, there's two places that have kind of come up on the radar with potential bowl destinations. Let's get ahead of ourselves for a second. Maybe Phoenix, maybe Charlotte. And that'd be all right. Charlotte's not too far. It's not close, but it's closer than Lincoln. Is my point for a bowl.
It's close to where I'm living out here. Either one are in my wheelhouse, but they really only make sense if we can actually attend in person. Otherwise, just watching on the tube, No,
I know. We'll see. We'll see if that the fans are allowed or not. Cousin Dino says 34-20 20 Husker victory today. Cousin Dino, we'll talk next week. Probably get your take on Nebraska-Rutgers. How's that sound?
Sounds wonderful.
All right, Dino. Love you, buddy. There he is.
You bet. Bye.
Cousin Dino says Nebraska with the cover, Nebraska with the win, Nebraska closer to 500 and maybe a bowl situation. Okay, keep it on ESPN. Lincoln Real Red Reaction immediately following Nebraska-Minnesota. Give us your calls, your thoughts, your emails, your tweets. Nick Gregath, Bill Hooks, Schmitty, and Willie J. It will be a party. And hopefully one of those celebratory parties with a Nebraska win if you're a big Red fan. Real Red Reaction, ESPN Lincoln as soon as we're done. Nebraska-Minnesota, have a good football Saturday.